Testing, testing, testing.
Can you try that again for me?
Testing, testing.
Is that good? That was good?
Testing one, two, three. Testing, maybe a little bit up.
Okay.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Yeah, no, it's on. It's on.
Testing.
I know this was on site. A rap battle? I don't want to do that. I would not excel at that. You would? No. No.
Oh, I didn't know. I actually know.
Sorry, you get 30, then 18, and then it's...
So green is bad.
Green is 30.
Okay.
Again, good luck.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
I'm ready when you are. Hopefully not.
Let's see if I can get this off. Does it detach? There we go.
Greetings, I'm Michelle Anthony, President of the League of Women Voters, Wilkes-Barre area. On behalf of our Board of Directors, welcome. Please silence your cell phones. This event is being recorded in its entirety by Service Electric Television and will be broadcast and then posted on YouTube. No part of this recording may be used or distributed by any person, candidate, campaign, or political group for any purpose whatsoever. Candidates may, however, provide a link on their websites to the full YouTube video. Many thanks to LCC, especially Susan Spry and Jerry Wilk, for providing this venue. Thanks also to our league board and members, all volunteers, who are working at this event tonight. Thank you to the candidates for their availability tonight, Democrat Megan Kocher and Republican Alec Ryncavage. We look forward to hearing their positions on the variety of issues that face the 119th District. Most importantly, audience, thank you for being here. We hope the information gleaned tonight will assist you in making informed voting decisions on Election Day or on your mail-in ballot. Just a note that if you submit a question for our candidates, and our league members are in the aisles with index cards or will be soon, make sure the question is for both candidates. We will not ask questions of a single candidate. Our moderator this evening, Dr. Christine Grieco-Mellon, is Director of Forensics and Faculty of Practice in Communication Studies at Wilkes University. We are thankful for her time and labor here tonight. Dr. Mellon will now briefly review the format for tonight's forum. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony. This evening, we'll spend some time talking with the two candidates running for the 119th State Legislative District of Pennsylvania, Democrat Megan Kocher and Republican Alec Ryncavage. The order in which candidates will speak was determined by coin toss, with candidate Ryncavage beginning. The order in which questions are asked will be rotated so that the second question will be asked of the candidate who went second on the first question, and so on. Everybody help me out with that. Candidates will be given a 2-minute period for both opening and closing statements. Questions for the candidates will be selected from a list submitted by our audience today and the league board. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question. We ask that you hold any applause until the end of the forum after the closing statements. And now our first question to candidate Kocher. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and explain why you are running for this position?
I believe we skipped opening statements, and my opponent is going to open us up.
You're correct. Thank you for keeping me honest.
That was a test. The audience had no clue. Good evening, everyone. I first want to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for this important debate here tonight. I want to thank my opponent, Megan Kocher, for attending here tonight. But most importantly, I want to thank the voters of the 119th District who blessed me with the opportunity to serve this district for the last 2 years. We all know that struggling families they are facing this year. Gas and groceries are through the roof. Utility bills are climbing, and the American dollar simply doesn't stretch as far as it used to. I believe families are doing the right thing. Yet I think just when families think they're getting ahead, they learn they're 2 steps behind. I was raised in a paycheck-to-paycheck household in Plymouth. I became a homeowner, a business owner, a borough councilman, and now I'm your state representative. These are the opportunities I want for all Pennsylvanians. 2 years ago, you entrusted me to go to Harrisburg to fight for you, and that is exactly what I have done these last 2 years. In my first term, I have solved over 10,000 constituent cases, hosted over 173 outreach events, and have been accessible through daily office hours and monthly town halls that I have hosted in your community. I have proven to be present, to deliver results, and to listen. With your support here tonight, I will continue adding to the over $20 million in grants that I have secured for this district and continue putting people before politics. Whether it be fighting utility companies with rate hikes or listening to your most vulnerable time, let's continue the job. Thank you.
Candidate Kocher, your opening statement.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Megan Kocher. I also want to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for hosting today and Luzerne County Community College for being here, my opponent for agreeing to be here today, and everybody for staying to listen to us talk about politics for an hour. I also want to say I have a bit of a scratchy throat. I was losing my voice the past couple of days, so just ignore my coughing and excessive drinking while we're up here today. But I just want to tell everybody a little bit about myself. I grew up in NANTICOKE. Both of my parents are here today, a contractor father and a daycare teacher mother. I live in Plymouth today with my husband and our 3 dogs. I went to Luzerne County College actually briefly and later went to Wilkes University where I studied political science and history. I worked a full-time job in community organizing to put myself through school. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I had in college to work directly in my community and learn so much about my community, the issues that everyone was facing, and ultimately that the struggles that my family and I were facing weren't unique to us. Sadly, this is the average circumstance that the average family is dealt right now. My work experience, while I am the Democratic candidate, is in nonpartisan community organizing. What this means is it was my job to bring people together across the aisle. We have too many politicians in Harrisburg today with an us versus them mentality. What we need are more politicians with an us versus the issue mentality. That's what I have, and that's why I believe I'm the best person for this job. Thank you all again for listening to us today, and I'm excited to answer any questions you might have.
So let's begin with candidate Kocher. I'm sure that this is on the mind of a lot of taxpayers, considering we're looking at the economy very closely in this election. Can you tell us what is your position on property taxes? Should they be retained as is, revised, or eliminated? And if you think they should be eliminated, what revenue source would you offer to replace the lost revenue generated by property taxes?
I'm really excited to answer this question. Every single day on the doors, my team and I hear voters talking about how they're being pushed out of their homes because they simply can't afford to continue to pay their property tax. The idea that we're going to eliminate property taxes, it's unrealistic. We need to generate that revenue from somewhere. So I have a plan to ultimately relieve the burden on working families and on seniors. What we need is a property tax circuit breaker. Like I said, my father is a contractor, my father-in-law is an electrician. A property tax circuit breaker functions the same way a traditional electrical circuit breaker does. It prevents your home from being overloaded. What a property tax circuit breaker does is it prevents your family from being overloaded with a property tax that you can't afford to pay. Ultimately, I believe property tax for seniors, and I would support for low-income people as well, should be capped at 3% of an individual family's income.
Candidate Ryncavage.
This is an issue that hits close to my heart. Every day we hear politicians say that they know what tough kitchen table conversations are, but how often do they actually have that tough kitchen table conversation? When I was running 2 years ago, both of my Republican primary and my Democratic opponents used my parents' back property taxes against me as a reason to not elect me to state representative. I said that's exactly who you should be electing to state representative. People who have had those tough kitchen table conversations. Over the last 2 years, countless people have come into my office. This is why I've supported legislation such as the expansion of the property tax and rent rebate from $750 to $1,000. If we're going to eliminate property taxes, as I hope we do in Harrisburg, we need to start with seniors. We need to start by exempting them and working our way backwards, and we can start with the legalization of skill games.
Let's try to hold our applause while we're going through the questions. Continuing with the economy, Candidate Ryncavage. So Pennsylvania hasn't raised its minimum wage, which is $7.25 an hour since 2009. And it is very difficult for many Pennsylvanians who are trying to meet these increased costs of our lifestyles. The government has proposed gradually increasing it over several years to $15 an hour. Do you support or oppose raising the minimum wage?
This is an issue that, I feel really bad for those folks that are dealing with low wages here in our economy. As I said in my opening statement, the dollar doesn't stretch as far as it used to. These are folks that I run into each day as they walk into my office when I host my daily office hours. In today's economy, I am open to the discussion of gradually increasing the minimum wage, but we have to be cognizant that we don't have a strong economy right now, that inflation is at a 20% high in the last 3 years, and we cannot be putting any more undue burden on our business owners. So we can have the conversation once we rebuild our economy in the next couple of years, but we have to be very cognizant that we cannot be pushing any more undue burdens or financial burdens on the end consumer at the end of the day.
Candidate Kocher.
Yeah, again, I'm really excited to answer this question. The fact is that 24% of the workforce in Pennsylvania 119 makes the minimum wage. That's a significant number of people within our district who are making the minimum wage. And only 14% of that group of people are under the age of 19. So we often hear that, this is a job for teenagers. They shouldn't be making significant wages. That's just not the fact. The highest demographic of people to make the minimum wage are women. Single mothers are amongst that group of people. Imagine trying to support your family on $7.25 an hour when corporations are making record profits, yet hiking up costs for essentially everything. It's not realistic. The state legislature adjusts their pay based on the consumer price index. Ultimately, what that means is they adjust their pay based on inflation. We need something similar that would relieve the burden on working families.
Okay.
Hold your applause, please.
This question is now being addressed to Candidate Kocher. So many Pennsylvanians are very concerned about their children and mental health. The CDC has concluded that mental health services, or the lack thereof, is a major contributing factor to increasing rates of depression, violence, and suicidal behavior among young people. What can the state do to increase mental health services, especially in our schools?
There are so many things that we could do to increase mental health services. I want to start with something that's actually completely unrelated, but shows proven results for improving the mental well-being of children. My day job is fighting for funding for universal meals across the state of Pennsylvania. What this means is I'm fighting to make sure that every child in Pennsylvania has a free lunch and a free breakfast while they're in school. It significantly impacts a child's mental well-being to not wonder whether or not they will be able to eat that day. That's just one of many measures. Ultimately, we need to significantly increase funding, and we need trained mental health professionals in schools.
Candidate Ryncavage.
We need to build a more compassionate society here in Pennsylvania. The statistics are troubling. As mental health increases in our society, the providers are actually decreasing. We saw this just a couple of years ago with the closure of First Hospital. This left a major gap for our first responders who don't want to incarcerate people with mental health issues, but they want to fix the issue. This is why this past budget, I was able to successfully deliver a $1.5 million budget surplus to the Wyoming Valley Behavioral Hospital. My policies are already investing in mental health.
Candidate Ryncavage. Pennsylvania, as well as many other states, has witnessed a lot of increase in gun violence. Do you think that additional regulations on gun ownership, registration, and types of weapons and ammunition are necessary to reduce gun violence? If so, what do you propose?
And this ties back to our last question about where does mental health play in society, because I think there's a balancing act between people's rights and also the mental health and the investment that we do. We need a more compassionate society. We also need to increase education. We also see with the gun violence issue that majority of the weapons used in gun violence are actually illegally obtained weapons. This is why we need to be backing law enforcement. We need more law and order candidates in government. This is why the Pennsylvania State Troopers Association has endorsed my candidacy 2 years ago. They endorsed it again this year. The FOP has endorsed my candidacy 2 years ago, again this year, as well as the corrections officers. In the terms of education, my office is already doing this. We host routinely gun training seminars so that people understand how to conceal carry, how to do active shooter trainings. We're already putting this to work in the 119th district.
Candidate Kocher.
The fact is, we're not doing nearly enough right now to address gun violence. I want to preface this by saying I come from a family of gun owners. My entire family believes that reasonable, responsible gun ownership requirements like universal background checks and red flag laws would not reasonably impact any of us. Again, a family of gun owners. This is because gun regulations don't impact responsible, law-abiding citizens. They impact threats to society. We ultimately need to increase this. The idea that we should let gun violence run rampant because the Constitution dictates the right for a well-regulated militia to bear arms, it's absurd. What is well about the regulations that we currently have? Our Constitution is a living, breathing document meant to be adjusted based on the current needs of society. Right now, we're not doing that. We're failing our children, and we can't wait until gun atrocities happen in Pennsylvania in our schools to take action.
Candidate Kocher. Right now, there are a lot of other voting issues on the minds of Pennsylvanians. Can you tell us, would you support an amendment to the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that would protect a woman's reproductive rights? Why or why not?
I absolutely would support that amendment. As a 25-year-old woman, the issue of abortion is paramount to me. The fact is that abortion restrictions do not decrease abortion. If we actually want to see abortion rates decrease, we need to invest in things that are proven to be pro-family, universal pre-K, mental health services. We need to make healthcare more affordable and accessible, education funding. These are the things that are proven to reduce abortion rates. At the end of the day, all abortion restrictions do is put women in dangerous situations, and it's not right. Nobody should make the decision about what happens with my body except for me.
Candidate Ryncavage.
This is an issue that continues to divide families and friends and political colleagues. Since representing the 119th district, I've taken a common sense approach to women's rights in my candidacy. I have never supported an outright ban on abortion. I have never supported outright banning emergency contraceptive. I was raised Catholic, and I'm personally pro-life, but I believe it comes down to the viability of the child. If the child can survive outside the womb, it needs to be protected just like any other human would. And we should also allow exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother.
Okay, candidate Ryncavage, another important issue affecting voters. Do you support the House Bill 1840 that would ban PA municipalities from becoming sanctuary cities for undocumented immigrants? Why or why not?
100% I would ban any sanctuary cities or undocumented safe havens for undocumented immigrants. We need to be investing in Americans. Americans should come first. Pennsylvanians should come first. We should not have jobs going to people that should not be here. We should not be questioning the integrity of our elections or the integrity of the safety in our communities. 100% I would support getting rid of that.
Candidate Kocher.
I want to start by commending local law enforcement for the incredible job that they're currently doing at keeping our community safe. But the fact is that local law enforcement is not ICE, and sanctuary cities are simply cities where people are able to go where they will not be arrested simply for being undocumented if they are not suspected of committing another crime. Local crime is out of control. That is the fact. I fully do believe that we need to invest in local law enforcement and give them every single tool that they need to address the issue of crime that exists in our communities. Undocumented immigrants are not the ones committing those crimes. Look at the drug bust in Edwardsville just last week. Who was that?
Candidate Kocher. I'm going to ask the audience, if you cannot be respectful of these candidates, you will be asked to leave this venue.
As my opponent said, we have to be investing in law enforcement, and based on her answer, that is why they have endorsed my candidacy and they continue to support me.
Okay, Candidate Kocher, what role does state government have, if any, in aiding local law enforcement departments in dealing with gang violence, which is something that is on the rise in Northeast PA?
Absolutely. Our state legislature has the duty of funding and collaborating with local law enforcement to address the issue of crime. Like I said, our local law enforcement is doing a fantastic job at addressing crime. I don't believe you are endorsed by our local law enforcement, though.
I am 100% endorsed by the FOP, the PSTA, the PSCOA, the Firefighters Association, the Nurses Association.
My opponent has voted against funding for our Plymouth Police Department. I want that to be said.
Okay, let me please remind the audience this is not a debate. Candidate Ryncavage, can you please answer the question about gang violence and law enforcement?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. The answers you're hearing tonight from my opponent are simply spend, 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 spend. If that was the answer to every solution, we would be certainly out of problems here in this society. I am, in fact, endorsed by local law enforcement. What my opponent wants to talk about is how I voted against a tax increase in the municipality of Plymouth. They wanted to vote to increase taxes during COVID when families couldn't make ends meet, when families were on unemployment. I voted against that, is what I voted against.
Candidate Ryncavage, Pennsylvania's transportation system is aging rapidly. Trust me on this, I go by a very rickety bridge every day. So much so that the state's roads and bridges are often ranked by the American Society of Civil Engineers as among the worst in the nation. That is a travesty. What do you think the legislature can do to restore Pennsylvania's transportation infrastructure?
It is true what you said. Pennsylvania, as a state, owns the most amount of roads and bridges than any other state in our Commonwealth, and they're also the most deteriorating. Fun fact, Pennsylvania also owns the most amount of dirt roads. There are state dirt roads in this Commonwealth. The answer to this, my opponent told WVIA that she's completely against fracking. The impact fee contributes over a couple $2 billion a year to investing in this infrastructure. If we're going to continue investing, we need to continue bringing jobs back to Northeast Pennsylvania. We need to open up Pennsylvania for business. We need to continue to drill energy in Pennsylvania so that money can go back into our infrastructure, so we're not taking out of the pockets of everybody in this audience here tonight.
Okay, so Candidate Ryncavage, Pennsylvania is the largest U.S. natural gas producer that does not impose a severance tax. Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Wyoming, and Ohio all impose a severance tax on natural gas. What is your position on a severance tax, either to replace the state's extraction tax or in addition to it?
What you had just asked me is if we should introduce a new tax here in Pennsylvania. No, we should not. Every state in this country has a different form of government. Pennsylvania has a full-time legislator. Some places call it an impact fee. Some places call it a severance tax. We already have an impact fee here in this Commonwealth that contributes billions to our local economy. We do not need to put another tax on businesses. We do not need to put another tax on families. I vote no on those taxes.
Okay, candidate Kocher.
Am I starting with the infrastructure question, or did we move on?
Oh, I apologize. Yes.
Okay, I would like to answer both. So the fact is our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our water supply, they need updating. I believe we got a C- generally, but our water supply, my husband's an engineer and was talking about this a couple days ago, got a D, is that correct? So our water supply also needs to be updated. We can't be stuck in the past when it comes to our infrastructure, and yet we currently are. We need to invest in public transportation. We need to invest in updating outdated roads and bridges and making sure that our travel systems are safe. And we need to invest in 21st century technology, and this would create additional jobs by installing, for example, railways throughout the state. Moving on to the next question, I absolutely do support a severance tax. The gas that's in our land doesn't belong to our representatives. It doesn't belong to gas companies as much as they demonstrate an entitlement towards it. The fact is that Pennsylvania subsidized $3.8 billion towards our fossil fuel industry in 2018. Billion. That's not an insignificant amount of money. We absolutely should implement a severance tax. The business isn't going to leave Pennsylvania because the business hasn't left the other 34 states that have a similar tax. We're being taken advantage of, and we have representatives who are allowing our working families to suffer when we can easily introduce a new system of revenue to our communities.
Okay, candidate Kocher. With housing prices and rents outpacing local wages, is there a role for the state government to assist citizens in finding affordable housing? If so, what would you propose?
Absolutely. I think this isn't a single fix issue. There are so many things that we need to do to address housing right now. First of all, raising our minimum wage. Like I said, people aren't making wages where they're able to keep up with inflation today. In addition to that, we have so many opportunities to increase housing. We have thousands of empty houses across the district that we're not utilizing. We're allowing out-of-state people to come buy up all our property, including LLCs who are increasing the amount at which they're buying homes significantly right now. We need to legislate this so that we can ensure that people can actually buy their first home instead of allowing LLCs to buy up all of the houses on the market, jack up the rent, and then working people like me are never able to get a hold of them. My husband and I bought our home at 22 years old. It was one of the hardest things that we ever did. I'm grateful for that opportunity, but I recognize that I'm privileged in a way that so many people are not.
Candidate Ryncavage.
Thank you. I commend my opponent for buying her house at 22 years old, and this is probably actually an issue we agree upon. Housing is an issue that it's part of the American dream. Just earlier this year, my girlfriend and I were able to buy our first home, and I felt firsthand the issues that folks who are lower and middle income go through when buying a house. The utilities, the security deposits that they want to put on every single utility that you have to open in your house. I understand these issues. That is why the Pennsylvania Realtors Association has endorsed my candidacy. They endorsed it 2 years ago, and they endorsed it again. Thank you.
Candidate Ryncavage. So we've been hearing a lot about taxation and whether or not some of the sources of revenue that are being realized could be used for other things. Let's turn to the idea of legalizing recreational marijuana in the state. All of the states bordering us have now legalized it and have experienced large revenue gains. The governor estimates that revenue from legalized pot in year 4 would top $330 million. What are your thoughts on legalizing marijuana, and if you had that budget, where would you spend it?
Yeah, and this is probably another issue where my opponent and I agree. This is something that I view as a generational issue. 2 years ago, I sat in this room and I said that I support the legalization of adult use cannabis, and once again, I support the use of adult use cannabis. We have to understand, we have to have a regulatory framework in place, of course, and everybody would agree that we don't want it to get it in the hands of children, and we also have to make sure that our first responders have the tools they need to combat this in the community. The governor's proposal this year, there were a couple proposals for adult use cannabis. Unfortunately, I didn't like like the details of them. One of them called for cannabis to be sold in state liquor stores. I'm sure none of us would agree with that here today. So I would have to take a look at the policies, but that money should go into the general fund or possibly to alleviating property taxes. We should not spend the money before we actually legalize it, though.
Candidate Kocher.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I agree that cannabis shouldn't be sold out of liquor stores. It's 2024. It's crazy again that we're not utilizing the revenue from recreational marijuana. We're losing money to states like New Jersey. People are driving across the border, buying marijuana there. And that's revenue that could be used to fund our schools or fix our roads. We need it. Ultimately, in order to increase the revenue in Pennsylvania, what we have to do is introduce new sources of revenue. Taxing the sale of recreational marijuana is a perfect way to do that.
Candidate Kocher, as a state representative, would you support open primaries in Pennsylvania?
I absolutely would support open primaries in Pennsylvania. I just want to look, I have the numbers written here. I believe it's 740,000 independent voters are registered in Pennsylvania and over 6,000 in 119. We had a bill in the Pennsylvania House yesterday, HB 976, that would have allowed open primaries. I'm thankful that it passed. Not everybody did vote for it, but we're disenfranchising too many voters by not allowing them to vote in open primaries.
Candidate Ryncavage.
Yeah, this is an issue that I think more and more as our political parties start to get more divisive and everybody starts to go off the reservations, we need to figure out how do we talk to the common sense folks in the middle. I've been a moderate Republican as I've served the 119th district over the last 2 years. One thing that we have to understand if we do open up our primaries is we have to consider what happens to our committee elections. We both have Democratic committees and Republican committees. So we have to take a look at these details and actually file through them if we're going to put it up for a vote. But this is certainly an issue that I'm open to the discussions on.
Candidate Ryncavage, a follow-up on the minimum wage. So if the minimum wage had been tied to cost of living increases, we probably would not be fighting so hard over it. So when a minimum, when a minimum wage is finally voted on, would you support tying it to cost of living indexes?
COLAs are another issue that very hard to discuss in Harrisburg. I voted against COLAs and I voted in favor of COLAs just as early as yesterday or as late as yesterday. At this time, I think we have years of our American economy where we have years of prosperity and we have years of downturns. Tying that to the cost of living adjustment would not account for when we have very good years and we have bad years. Again, I have to side with we cannot put any more financial burden on our businesses that are just going to be passed down to the consumer at the end of the day.
Candidate Kocher.
Yeah, I think I somewhat touched on this in my original answer. If the state legislature is able to tie their pay to the consumer price index, then working people should have their pay tied to the consumer price index. Politicians aren't celebrities, they're not gods. They shouldn't be afforded any protections that the average person isn't. In addition to that, they receive excellent health care that the average person doesn't have access to. Ultimately, I think it's a bit unfair.
Candidate Kocher, the U.S. is experiencing a time of hyperpolarization, sadly. Perhaps the most extreme partisan polarization since the period leading to the Civil War. At the same time, Pennsylvania is one of only 2 states in the nation with a divided legislature. That is, the Democrats control the House while the Republicans hold the Senate. What are your thoughts on hyperpartisanship? Do you think that compromise, consensus, and bipartisanship can be achieved in today's General Assembly? Why or why not?
I absolutely do think that on a number of issues, we should be able to agree and work across the aisle. I think there are some issues that we can never compromise on. For instance, the issue of abortion. But we do need to be working across the aisle. Like I said, my background is in nonpartisan community organizing. My background is in talking to voters on either side of the aisle, and again, organizing against the issues, not against the party. That's what we need more of in Harrisburg.
Candidate Ryncavage.
I am the first Republican in my family. I'm the son of 2 Democrats, and my grandfather was the chair of the Democrat Party back in the day. I understand that right now that people don't feel at home. At times, I haven't felt at home in my own party, and that's why there have been plenty of issues that I voted with Democrats on and against Republicans, and there's plenty of issues I voted with Republicans and against Democrats on. But the true test of this is what action has already happened. We can always talk about what we're going to do, but let me talk to you about what I've actually done as your state representative, because because as a freshman in the minority party, I already got a bill that held utility companies accountable, and I don't know the last time we held utility companies accountable in this Commonwealth, but I got a bill passed through the House committee unanimously, passed through the House unanimously, passed through the Senate committee unanimously, passed through the Senate, and it is on its way to the governor's desk. That is the true test of a representative that can work with both sides, and that is how I've been able to deliver over $20 million in grants back to the 119th District. I will continue to do that as your state representative.
Candidate Ryncavage. Planned Parenthood in Pennsylvania receives partial funding from the state's Medicaid fund. It provides a wide range of health services to low-income women. What is your position on PA Medicaid money supporting Planned Parenthood?
This is actually exactly why I voted against the menstrual product earlier in the session that my opponent has brought up. We already fund organizations like Planned Parenthood and United Way. People want to think that these organizations are only about abortion, but actually I will agree with you that Planned Parenthood does stuff for women that goes beyond abortion. I voted for a budget that put money into their pockets, and so to answer this question, yes, they are providing services, and we have to make sure that those services they provide are actually going to the end user. But certainly, I voted for this year's budget.
Candidate Kocher.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Planned Parenthood in Pennsylvania receives partial funding from the state's Medicaid fund. It provides a wide range of health services to low-income women. What is your position on PA Medicaid money supporting Planned Parenthood?
Thank you very much. Like my opponent said, Planned Parenthood funds a number of services for women that is not exclusive to abortion. I am very pro Planned Parenthood funding these necessary services. At the end of the day, they do family planning. They provide so many necessary products to women. The fact is, not everybody does have access to the Planned Parenthoods. Some people have to travel hours to get to one. Talking about the menstrual bill, that is a bill, specifically that vote would have provided period products to low-income school-aged girls in schools. If a girl is too poor to be able to access period products, she is not going to be able to go to school. That directly impacts her life and her ability to get an education, which she cannot do if she can't access those opportunities. If you can't afford a box of tampons, I'm willing to bet you can't afford to make it to your local Planned Parenthood.
Candidate Kocher. Do you support HB 78 to establish the medical relief program and/or Governor Shapiro's proposal to use $4 million of state money to erase the medical debt for thousands of Pennsylvanians, mostly in lower income and rural areas?
I absolutely do support this. I've been very open about this. This year I noticed a mole that seemed a bit strange, and my husband encouraged me to go to the doctor. I realized I had skin cancer at 25 years old. I was able to get it treated so quickly, and I'm very thankful for that. We have fantastic insurance, and we still owe thousands of dollars for having had that necessary procedure done. Like I said, we're in a position of privilege. We both work. We're able to afford to pay off these bills eventually. Not everybody is in that position. Poor people shouldn't die or not get their medication or not be seen because they're not able to afford to see a doctor. It's barbaric. I absolutely support canceling medical debt for low-income people.
Candidate Ryncavage.
I actually believe these two issues are tied together, the last question, this question, but I do want to start with saying I wish you a full and speedy recovery, and I'm sorry that you had to experience with the battle of skin cancer. You're too young for that. But the two issues tie together because it's about fiscal responsibility and about electing a representative that is going to be smart with the Pennsylvania budget. All we heard tonight was spend, 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 spend. The menstrual product that my opponent mentioned would take the average cost of an $8 box of tampons and charge $3,000 on the Pennsylvania taxpayer. Why should an $8 product be charged to $3,000 to the taxpayer? That's because the government is the buyer. And so when answering this question about should we be erasing debt, we should not be erasing debt. We should be fiscally responsible, and we should be keeping Pennsylvania affordable. That starts with fracking, expanding energy production in Pennsylvania, reducing the red tape on businesses, keep Pennsylvania affordable so people can afford their bills, not give them a way out.
So, Candidate Ryncavage, on the fracking issue, do you not believe that this is an environmental hazard to the citizens of Pennsylvania?
This is 100% an environmental issue, and I support all of the above energy, unlike my opponent who has said to WVIA that we need to completely get rid of fracking in this Commonwealth. But to do this, if you're going to produce energy, why not do it in the cleanest economy in the country? Why not produce energy here in Pennsylvania? Because if you erase fracking in Pennsylvania, it will continue to exist in Russia, in India, in China, some of the dirtiest economies in this country. We need to be doing it here where we have regulations, where we have standards, so that we can support fresh water and clean air.
Candidate Kocher.
The fact is, we have families who are actually lighting their tap water on fire. You can't drink oil, okay? So we need to start by recognizing that this is an environmental issue. Having said that, my opponent is almost right. I'm not personally pro-fracking. Having said that, we need to currently evaluate our state's energy needs and the needs of our citizens of tomorrow, right? We need to currently take an all-in energy approach, but this needs to be heavily focused on cutting subsidies for fossil fuels and introducing new subsidies to clean energy. We need to heavily invest in clean energy, transition away from fossil fuels with an ultimate goal of fully phasing out fossil fuels. I do believe that. I also believe that we need to focus on our current energy needs, and the transition needs to be a part of it.
Okay. Candidate Kocher, Governor Shapiro has proposed 2 ways to financially assist the state's college students. One is to increase the FEA grants to $6,750, which helps all Pennsylvania college students, including those at private universities. The other is to place a $1,000 per semester cap on tuition for Pennsylvania families earning $70,000 or less at the 10 Pennsylvania state universities and community colleges. What are your thoughts on these 2 proposals?
I support both of them. Like I said, I went to Wilkes University and I worked a full-time job to put myself through college. In addition to that, I took out student loans, which I'm still working to pay off. The fact is, higher education, a more educated society, does benefit everybody. I absolutely support it. I don't think people should be unable to obtain an education because of their family's financial status. Having said that, I would like to address the spend, spend, spend. There are places that we do need to start heavily spending. There are also places where we could generate a lot of revenue. Like I said, recreational marijuana, a severance tax. Ultimately, we have too many corporations like Walmart who are utilizing Delaware tax loopholes. These are shady corporations utilizing tax loopholes, claiming a loss in Pennsylvania and a profit in Delaware so that they can screw over working people and ultimately take advantage of us. These corporations should be paying their fair share in Pennsylvania, and we can use that revenue to support our higher education.
Candidate Ryncavage.
Education is a topic that I love to talk about because it's not a one-size-fits-all solution for all students. Perfect example, when I graduated from high school, I knew that a higher education was not for me. College and a 4-year degree sometimes could be the most expensive way for a student to figure out what they don't want to do for the rest of their life. And so on the topic of education, we should be focusing on trade schools and community colleges. There is a very comprehensive plan, as you said, from the government in terms of community colleges. We haven't seen much progress on that, and I'm still discussing that with the governor. But in terms of education as a whole, I'm happy to support community colleges. I'm happy to represent the Luzerne County Community College, and I'm happy to support our brothers and sisters in trades. I'm endorsed by the Northeast Pennsylvania Building Trades. I'm endorsed by 14 of the 16 trade and labor organizations that make up Pennsylvania, and I'm happy to make sure that students have the right size fit for what education needs they need, because we're running out of electricians and plumbers, not doctors and lawyers.
Candidate Ryncavage. Almost 4 years ago, Commonwealth Court Judge Renee Jubileer ruled that it was unconstitutional for the state to inequitably fund its public school districts and that the state had historically underfunded too many poorer districts. Governor Shapiro proposes adding $1 billion to the education budget to begin increasing the state's contribution. Do you think that is sufficient? In addition, do you support retaining the practice of holding harmless those wealthy districts that continue to receive increases in state support every year?
This was an issue that was the first issue I had to hit the ground running on when I was first elected to the 119th district. As we all know, the Crestwood School District is one of those school districts that's in the 119th district that continues to fall behind when it comes to state funding of education dollars. The saddest thing I had to deal with early on in my state representative career are teachers who faced the 26 furloughs up in the Crestwood School District, students who faced losing art, music, and library in that school. It's one of the reasons why I brought the policy Policy Committee here to Northeast Pennsylvania to talk about education funding. The proposal by the governor that was coming down from the court created winners and losers. If we are going to invest $1 billion into our education funding, we should not be creating winners and losers. That education funding formula from the governor put more money in students in Wilkes-Barre and Valley West and Nanticoke and left students behind in Crestwood. As a state representative, I believe that no student should be worth more or worth less in this Commonwealth. We need to be funding them all fairly.
Candidate Kocher.
Yeah, I want to start by saying our previous system of education funding had winners and losers. That wasn't absent from the previous system. If you lived in a low-income zip code, you weren't able to obtain the same education as your peers who lived in a higher-income zip code. That's the fact. I fully support the education bill that was passed. Equity and equality are not the same thing. What this bill sought to establish is equity. It sought to ensure that every child has access to the same quality education that other children have access to. We need to view this issue with a little bit of empathy, okay? The fact is, everybody won in this bill. Everybody got additional funding for their schools, and they would have gotten significantly more with the tax equity payment that was ultimately cut out of the bill. The tax equity payment would have rewarded money to our communities who tax to the fullest extent for property tax. We lost that. That's money that could be benefiting families right now that's not.
Okay, Candidate Kocher. Is illegal immigration providing challenges in the 119th district? Is it providing challenges nearby? If so, what can the Pennsylvania legislator do to combat these challenges?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I don't personally believe that illegal immigration is impacting the 119th to the fullest extent, but I do recognize that it's an issue we're dealing with nationally. We need immigration reform, and that is the fact. I do support reforming our immigration system. Having said that, I think there are some things that our state legislature can do. When I'm on the doors talking to voters about this issue, what I ultimately hear is people feeling like they're left behind. People feel, why did these people get one benefit when I don't have access to that same benefit? Again, I think we need to do a lot of things to ultimately increase revenue in the state of Pennsylvania so that we can do our constitutional duty of providing for society, providing for low-income people, for our students, and fully funding our public schools. There are a lot of things that we could be doing, but I think this is an issue that is impacting other areas a bit more heavily than in the 119th.
Candidate Ryncavage.
Before I talk about the issue of education, I want to highlight something key that my opponent Megan said on the topic of education. She said we need more empathy. That's exactly what we need in the 119th district, because what that funding formula said, and my opponent just said she wants to get rid of property taxes for all Pennsylvanians. Well, that
I never said that.
That funding.
I never said that.
You don't want to get rid of property taxes?
I want a property tax circuit breaker. Do you want me to explain it to you?
We are not conducting a debate here today. Thank you so much. Perhaps you can talk to the candidates individually about these issues. Candidate Ryncavage.
Thank you, Doctor. As I was saying, the funding formula that Governor Shapiro pushed forward actually said that the Crestwood School District is not taxing families enough. I would love for my opponent to go knock doors at Mountaintop and tell them that their property taxes are not high enough. We need a representative that's not going to be a rubber stamp with their political party, but can actually break through that and vote for what's right for the 119th district and not what's for the political party. On the topic of, excuse me, Doctor, on the topic of illegal immigration, this is exactly why, again, I'm endorsed by the FOP, the PSTA, the PSCOA, and the Realtors Association, because absolutely illegal immigration is the reason we have a lack of housing inventory. Our housing authorities are filled with folks that are being subsidized by the Pennsylvania government. We need to stop that here in this state.
Yeah, actually, though, he was answering two questions.
Thank you.
So, okay. So that was my fault. I'll take
No,
that
that's okay,
right on me.
Doctor.
You're so kind. All right, so Candidate Ryncavage, do you think ranked choice voting is possible in Pennsylvania? What is your position on ranked choice voting?
You know, I think before we talk about any election reform, we need to talk about the election system we have. I'm standing here tonight as there is a Luzerne County Election Board hearing going on where 6,700 mail-in ballots were spelled with my name incorrectly. To make matters worse, a second ballot was sent out, half the district hasn't received it, and the other half of the district didn't receive 1 ballot, didn't receive 2 ballots, but received 3 ballots. So before we talk about changing the electoral system here in our country, we need to make sure that we are investing in training and resources so that our elections are fair and free, because what's happening here at a local level is just a snapshot of what people are feeling nationally. We can't have any disenfranchised voters. We need free and fair elections.
Candidate Kocher.
I want to start by saying I would support ranked choice voting given the opportunity. I would also like to address the issue of mail-in ballots. I'm just as upset as you are to see that your name was misspelled on the ballot. At the end of the day, I never support any voter confusion. It was wrong. I'm glad the Board of Elections is doing their part to make sure that the victims of this, the voters who are confused and receive the wrong ballot, are being educated and know what the next steps are. I would like to see a more timely response, and my team and I are doing everything we can to address that as well.
Thank you.
Candidate Kocher. So, let's talk more about elections. Gerrymandering, the process of drawing electoral districts to advantage one's party's candidates over others, contributes to today's hyperpolarization of the legislature. Fair districts and several other groups have proposed shifting responsibility from the General Assembly and the Legislative Reappointment Commission to some other body to produce districts that are much more reflective of their community's common interests, as well as being politically balanced as possible. What are your thoughts on these proposals?
I don't support gerrymandering. If you haven't heard of Fair Districts PA, look them up. I think they're doing great work. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to be educated by them on the issue, and I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to sign their pledge. There are so many issues leading to hyperpolarization, including gerrymandering. If we want to address this issue, I think there are so many things we have to do. We need spending caps on elections. We need term limits. Ultimately, we need to limit the amount of institutional power that politicians are able to garner while they're in office, and gerrymandering is just one of those tactics that they use to stay elected forever.
Candidate Ryncavage.
It's unfortunate, but gerrymandering occurs on both sides of the aisle. If you look at the Pennsylvania legislature just 2 years ago, we had 114 Republican seats. Today, we have just 101. It is very clear that you can manipulate districts. One of the ways you can actually manipulate districts is through illegal immigration. Districts are actually drawn based on the number of residents, not by how many people are actually registered to vote. You can increase the census numbers every 10 years, which actually affects your election districts. I want to see that both sides get out of this so that we can actually have districts that are representative of the people and not political parties down in Harrisburg that want to draw somebody out so that they can garner political power.
Candidate Ryncavage, on PA's campaign finance laws, we have some of the most least restrictive in the nation. There are no limits on how much groups and individuals can contribute to candidates and parties, and there are few restrictions on what candidates can spend their campaign funds on. So various reform proposals have appeared in both chambers over the years but never advanced. What is your position on the state's campaign finance laws, and what reforms, if any, would you support?
Doctor, the question you're asking here is actually a question that I interpret as transparency within our elected officials. As an elected official here in the 119th district, I have actually declined the per diem here in this district. I have never reported a meal to the taxpayers. I believe that if I'm in Harrisburg or if I'm in Nanticoke, I'm going to eat lunch, so I do not put that on the taxpayers. I do not take a state-funded vehicle, and I do not take a state-funded cell phone. I would love to know if my opponent, if elected, would decline all of those perks. I also have never received a gift from a lobbyist. So yes, I am in support of any restrictions they want to oppose, because I'm already the most restrictive and the most fiscally responsible representative in Harrisburg.
Candidate Kocher.
Yeah, I'm going to start by addressing my opponent's question, and then I'll move to yours. I agree with that. I don't think taxpayers should pay for legislators to eat while they're serving the district. Like I said, they're not gods. They're people. You're making $100-something thousand a year salary. You can afford to buy your own lunch. At the end of the day, we ultimately do need significant campaign finance reform. Going through campaign finance reports when I decided I was going to run for office, I was completely blindsided by the things that people spend campaign finance money on. Like you said, you could literally spend it on anything. It's wrong. You shouldn't be able to take $50,000 from an individual. The idea of one person, one vote is significantly deplenished by the system of money that we have in politics, where people can essentially buy elections and they could buy politicians. At the end of the day, we need significant reform on how much money you could accept, how much money you could spend throughout an entire cycle, and what you are actually able to spend that money on.
Candidate Kocher. Is there a local environmental issue in the 119th or in Luzerne County that you think should receive attention from the Pennsylvania legislature?
There are a number of environmental issues in the 119th. One thing I would like to focus on is a solar farm that was brought to our attention at the doors recently. I'm very pro green energy and clean energy, but voters were telling us on the doors that ultimately this solar farm would have destroyed a wetland behind their home. I don't support that. In order to transition towards green and greener energy, I think we ultimately need to take a common sense approach, which is utilizing the number of parking lots and buildings that we have right now. What I would like to propose is a grant program that would allow working families to receive a grant if they were under a certain income threshold so that they can utilize the grant to install solar panels on this home. What this would do is it would increase property values. It would decrease prices on consumers. It would improve the values of our community, and it would create jobs. We would be able to keep people in Pennsylvania by creating 21st century jobs, train people in installing solar panels, and it would be one step towards transitioning away from dirty energy towards clean energy.
Candidate Ryncavage.
It's unfortunate that the Pennsylvania state government has now weaponized environment and the climate on our local municipalities. One of the first initiatives that I funded as a state representative was a crucial bridge in Fairview Township, the Dale Drive Bridge, which was closed for nearly 10 years and was causing ambulances and fire trucks and police cars to be diverted up to 10 minutes, as well as school buses. The Department of Environmental Protection here in Pennsylvania stands for don't expect a permit. We are not open for business in this state. This has been a 3-year project to replace a bridge that is no bigger than this stage and has costed the taxpayers over $1 million. We need to focus on how the legislature can stop weaponizing the Department of Environmental Protection here in the state government.
Candidate Ryncavage, how do you think you could connect better with the constituents in your district?
I'm very proud in my community engagement here in the 119th district. Last year, I hosted monthly town halls in the backyards of the communities I represent. One town hall for every community I represent. I also send out a monthly newsletter that's in print. I do a weekly newsletter for people who want to be more engaged with me, and I'm very active on social media. Getting the word out there and being connected with residents is certainly not an issue I have here as a state representative.
Candidate Kocher.
In order to be more accessible to voters, first of all, I think it's incredibly important. What I would do if elected, I've been knocking doors relentlessly since I was 18 years old. Like I said, that was my first job in community organizing when I was in college. I think it's important to stay on the doors once elected. Too many politicians utilize canvassing to get elected, and they're not really making that effort once they are elected to continue to stay in touch with their constituents. I understand, it's a busy schedule, but we have a system right now, 1 year of working, 1 year of campaigning. We need to address that. I think politicians would need to spend less time campaigning if they spent more time actually being involved in their communities.
Candidate Kocher, Pennsylvania is a right-to-work state with weak union protections. What is your position on unions in general, and how would your position influence the work you do in Harrisburg?
I'm grateful to be endorsed by numerous unions, such as the United Auto Workers, the AFL-CIO, the Painters and Allied Trades, the Teamsters, PSEA, the American Federation of Teachers. At the end of the day, a right-to-work state means a right to work for less state, and I don't support that. I'm very pro-union. The first campaign that I had ever worked on was union-funded. We need to prioritize our right to collectively bargain, to organize, and ultimately, we need to take an approach of putting working people above massive corporations, and that's not what we're seeing out of Harrisburg right now.
Candidate Ryncavage.
This is just another example of how the 119th district has a representative that bucks party lines. I'm one of few Republicans in Harrisburg that is actually endorsed by the Northeast Pennsylvania Building Trades. I'm endorsed by the IBEW, Boilermakers, Steam Fitters, you name it, they are me. There are 14 out of the 16 in Northeast Pennsylvania that have endorsed me. I stand with my union brothers and sisters.
Candidate Ryncavage, what is the endorsement you're most proud of?
I'm proud of them all because they each represent somebody in this district, and I think as a state representative, you have to be somebody that at times has to put their personal bias aside. One of the things that electrified me to knock on so many thousands of doors when I was running 2 years ago is because I felt that my opponent wouldn't be able to represent a Trump supporter the same way he would represent a Biden supporter. When you come into my office, we don't ask if you're registered to vote. We don't ask if you have a party affiliation. We serve everyone, whether you live in this district or not. There are representatives that if you don't live in their district, they'll send you to that person's district. We serve everyone. If you are a citizen here in Pennsylvania, we will help you out.
Candidate Kocher.
Yeah, I have so many endorsements. I'm so grateful to everybody who has been willing to get involved in this race. If I had to choose my #1 endorsement that I'm most proud to have, I would say PSEA. I'm so grateful that our public school teachers, thank you. I'm so grateful that our public school teachers trust me to provide strong public schools where every child has the opportunity to obtain an adequate and equitable education.
So, Candidate Kocher, are you satisfied with the current state of funding for education?
I'm not. Like I said, I support the education bill that passed through the House, but there was so much more that could have been included in that bill that was ultimately cut. We have so much work to do to make sure that every child has access to, like I said, an adequate and equitable education. I went to Greater Nanticoke Area High School. I had incredible teachers who did so much with so little. Imagine what they could have did if they were fully funded and had access to resources that so many that so many other schools in wealthier districts had. Growing up, I knew that other schools had access to resources that we didn't. Ultimately, like I said, my teachers did a great job, but they should not have had to buy supplies with their own money. They shouldn't have had to scrounge the way that they did to make things work. Every child deserves access to an education. This is the foundation of our future. Investing in education means investing in the future of the 119th, and I absolutely think we need to do every single thing in our power to do that to the fullest extent.
Candidate Ryncavage.
The funding formula that we passed this year, that I voted no on, created winners and losers. A child in Wilkes-Barre should not be worth more than a child in Crestwood. And this is coming from a legislator that had school districts that won. Wyoming Valley West hit record numbers in funding. Greater Nanticoke area, record numbers in funding. Hanover area, record number in funding. But let me tell you something. It doesn't just start with public education. I haven't heard my opponent here talk tonight about school choice. There is one thing the government should stay out of, and that is telling a parent how they should educate their student. We need to make sure that students are not defined by their zip code. I'm a self-taught software engineer. I could have went to any school district I wanted to learn that trade. If you are in the arts or the music, there are programs out there. It's why I voted to expand the EITC program and why I'm proud to support school choice in Pennsylvania.
Candidate Ryncavage, what is your position on using public funds to provide voucher scholarships to private schools via the PASS PA Money for Student Success Bill? Similarly, what's your position on the way that charter schools are regulated and funded?
That funding, or the PASS scholarship that came out of the House of came out of the Senate last year, had bipartisan support. There were senators in Philadelphia that recognized that the public school system is not adequately sending their students. We even have state representatives who talk about how they only support public schools, they don't support school choice, but yet send their students to Catholic school. That is not right. We need to be making sure that parents make the choice for what the correct education is. That bill, the PASS scholarship, had bipartisan support in the Senate. It came to the House, and the union bosses in the House of Representatives prevented that vote from going up on the board because they knew it would pass.
Candidate Kocher.
Ultimately, I don't believe our government does currently tell parents that they are unable to send their students to private schools if they so choose. Having said that, we have a constitutional mandate to fully fund our public schools. We do not have a constitutional mandate to send a child to a private school. What we need to do is fully fund our public schools and fulfill that constitutional mandate. Let's look at the facts on vouchers. Vouchers generally do not benefit low-income students the same way of which they do higher-income students. The general recipients of vouchers are students—
Quiet, please.
Excuse me, I'm talking. The general recipients of vouchers are students who likely belong to families that would be able to afford to send them to a private school anyways. We need to satisfy our constitutional amendment. We do not need to satisfy a parent's decision to go to another school if they so choose. Having said that, I would just like to continue. I lost my train of thought. Go ahead, ask the follow-up.
This is actually tonight's final question, and it is a two-pronged question, beginning with you, Candidate Kocher. What is your position on canceling meal debt in public schools, and what is your position on book bans?
I don't know how I'm going to answer this in a minute. Like I said, my day job, I work with an organization who is fighting for funding for universal meals. No child should sit through school wondering if they're going to be able to eat lunch that day. Meal shaming is ridiculous. I remember being in school, you knew who didn't pay their lunch bill, you knew who got free lunch, and that creates such a significant mental strain on a student where they're not able to perform academically. I fully support meal debt cancellation. The benefits are so, I don't know, in our face. Meal debt cancellation. Discipline rates go down. Attendance rates go up. It benefits everybody for children to eat while they're in school, and I don't think anybody could disagree that children do not deserve to be fed. We did have a meal debt cancellation bill in the Pennsylvania House that my opponent voted against. Having said that, book bans, I absolutely do not support book bans. It's 2024. We shouldn't be keeping information away from students.
Candidate Ryncavage, your response.
I serve the 13 communities of Northeast Pennsylvania. I don't serve Philadelphia. And so I voted against that bill because every school district in the 119th district already offers a free lunch and a free breakfast to students. I am not going to push taxes from Philadelphia or Pittsburgh or Erie on the good people of the 119th district. And if I have to buck my party, I'm happy to do that. Now, on the, what was the second question? I'm sorry,
The
I
book
lost my
bans.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of how the government needs to get out of people's lives. We have separation of powers in this state. I do not get involved in federal issues. I do not get involved in local issues. School district issues are left up to the parents and the school boards they elect and the curriculums of those areas. As a state legislator, I pledge to every person in this room and every resident in the 119th district that I know my role. I stick to state issues. I don't get involved in local issues.
Okay, we're now going to move on to closing statements. We'll begin with Candidate Ryncavage. Sorry, we'll begin with Candidate Kocher.
I just want to start again by thanking the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum today, to Luzerne County Community College for having us. It's great to be back, and for everybody who decided to attend to sit here. I know most people generally don't want to talk about politics at 8 p.m. on a weeknight, so thank you all so much for being here and listening to what we have to say. I also want to thank my opponent for engaging in good-spirited debate, while that wasn't necessarily the aim of our meeting here tonight. Again, I just want to say I grew up in a working-class family. I fully know the issues that everybody's experiencing because I have experienced them. I went to Greater Nanticoke Area High School. I went to Wilkes University. My husband and I ultimately left the district for 1 year to seek employment opportunities after college, and we fought like hell to get back to the 119th because we wanted to be with our family and we wanted to be in the area that we grew up in. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have bought our house and to be back here, and ultimately to do what I can to fight to make sure that everybody gets the same shake that we did, that everybody gets to do these things, ultimately to fulfill the American dream. Everybody should be able to eat while they're at school. Everybody should be able to attend school if they want to, attend a trade school if they want to, or ultimately buy a home if they want to. We have too many restrictions right now on working people when we have politicians in Harrisburg who are using the office to get rich, who are using the office to further their political or their personal agenda. It's not right. We need average working people who are actually going to fight against the issues in office, and that's why I think I'm the best candidate for this role.
Candidate Ryncavage.
Thank you to all of you who attended here tonight and to those watching on TV or online. In business, my father taught me that people don't buy what you sell, they buy why you sell it. Having heart is how I do this job, and it's how I've continuously separated myself from my opponents. Every day, and even on this stage here tonight, we hear politicians say that they know tough kitchen table politics. Well, 2 years ago, my parents suffered from back taxes. And while my political opponents attempted to use it to come after me, the voters of the 119th district answered and said there is no better person to send to Harrisburg. That is a real kitchen table conversation, and those are the conversations that I've had with voters across this entire district. But under the current Democratic control, their majority in Harrisburg, this has been the least productive legislative session in the history of our Commonwealth. As Pennsylvanians, we can't afford to go back. Tonight, I'm asking for your confidence, I'm asking for your vote, and I'm asking for the opportunity to keep fighting for you. Thank you for the incredible opportunity.
As a personal note, I hope you will allow me that as a college professor, I don't always have the privilege of sitting before two such incredibly professional, credible, knowledgeable, and respectful people, young people from where I'm sitting. And I want to thank you so much for the opportunity tonight. We really deserve to give you a round of applause. We don't always agree, but on behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Wilkes-Barre area, thank you to all of our candidates for the 119th District. This forum will be broadcast on Service Electric TV on Saturday, October 26th at 8 p.m. A link to that video will be posted on our League website and the Luzerne County YouTube channel on Sunday. Remember to vote in the general election on November 15th, whether by mail or in person. And please consider joining the League, a nonpartisan organization. Membership is open across genders as a League works to educate the community about voting rights and the democratic process. And my hearty congratulations to both of you and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, everybody, election day is November 5th. Yes. Please vote on November 5th.
Sorry, did I not say that? What did I say? Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe it might have just been a little.